Hey everyone, I'm Jeannie Northrup with Nutritional Outlook. I want to welcome you to today's webcast, A New Level of Performance, How CarnoSyn 4X Opens Doors in Sports Nutrition. CarnoSyn 4X exclusively from Natural Alternatives International, or its authorized distributor, delivers 4 times the bioavailability of conventional beta-alanine without paresthesia. With 40 plus years of ingredient innovation, Natural Alternatives International is a trusted formulator, manufacturer, and a strategic partner to leading sports nutrition brands. If you want to learn more, you can visit their websites, CarnoSyn.com and NAI-online.com. Before we jump into today's presentation, just have a few quick announcements to make. Today's program is designed to be interactive, and so we encourage you to ask any questions you have to our thought leader throughout today's presentation. You can submit any questions by typing them in the Q&A box. That box can be found at the bottom of your video player. We look forward to responding to your questions as time allows at the conclusion of the event. For viewing purposes, you can enlarge your slide window by clicking on the small icon in the bottom right corner of the media player. Please note, however, that all slides will advance automatically throughout today's webcast. If by any chance you experience any technical problems viewing or hearing this presentation, click on that question mark help widget that you should see located in the top right of your presentation window. It's now my pleasure to welcome and introduce Mark Ledoux, CEO and Chairman of Natural Alternatives International. Mark, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. I understand Mark's background includes founding Natural Alternatives back in 1980. He spent over 4 decades as one of the most respected and longest-serving executives in the nutritional supplements industry. As Chairman Emeritus of the Natural Products Association, founding Chairman of CRN International, and a recognized NGO representative of the World Health Organization and Food and Agricultural Organization, Codex Almeritus Commission, in Geneva, Switzerland. A lot to say there. Ledoux has been driving force in supplement industry regulation for decades. Mark, at this point, I'm going to turn the floor over to you to begin your presentation. Thanks again.
Well, hi, everybody. My name is Mark Ledoux. I'm excited to bring this information to you today about something that I consider to be really a breakthrough in metabolic science, with a new level of supplementation that addresses a lot of issues, particularly for women that wanted to take beta-alanine but weren't really interested in getting lit up like New York at night with paresthesia. So what I really want to talk about today is, what is this new level of performance that we can generate with CarnoSyn 4X? As you know, we brought beta-alanine to the marketplace under the trade name CarnoSyn, has over 50 clinical studies, is the only beta-alanine that has ever received a new dietary ingredient notification of acceptance by the FDA. And I thought it'd be really important to share with you, the research continues. And why is this research really important? Well, stop and think about what's happened since we introduced CarnoSyn beta-alanine years and years ago. Well, for starters, we have an enormous quantity of people who are taking GLP-1 medications, or they're doing peptide therapies, and they're achieving significant weight loss. Well, we're going to address where CarnoSyn 4X plays a vital role in that, but also not only in dealing with preventing sarcopenia, but also enhancing your performance with a lower degree of intake of actual CarnoSyn. So let's start. First, I'm going to give you a little overview of the thousands of clinical studies that I've tried to summarize on what CarnoSyn is. And then I'm going to talk about the difficulty with achieving adequate quantities of beta-alanine in your diet. I'm going to talk about what is CarnoSyn 4X. Then I'm going to reference some sports nutrition claims that I think you're going to find very intriguing, and some of the extraordinary advantages that we've seen with regulatory frameworks around the world, and again, new market opportunities, which I've already alluded to as it comes to people who are undergoing rapid weight loss. Unfortunately, they're not only losing fat, they're losing muscle mass. So let's start at the top. What is CarnoSyn? CarnoSyn is a dipeptide molecule. That means it's two individual amino acids that are conjoined metabolically. What's one of them? Well, good guess, beta-alanine. What's the other one? Histidine. There's a ton of histidine in your diet, and there's a boatload of histidine floating around in your system. And so the rate limiting component of making CarnoSyn in the body is the inadequate level of beta-alanine that you secure from your diet. Hence the real need for supplementation. CarnoSyn, naturally occurring dipeptide found in the brain as well as in muscles. Why is that important? Well, in the brain, we're starting to see cognitive enhancement through the presence of CarnoSyn. We know, for all of you that have exercised for many, many years and you've utilized the benefits of CarnoSyn, you can increase your endurance. And how does that actually work? Increasing your endurance means that you're allowing your body's striated musculature to work longer before achieving peak exhaustion. Why is that? Well, because it delays, the presence of CarnoSyn in the tissue delays acidosis, which comes from too much lactic acid in your dietary fibers, leading to really comprehensive muscle fatigue or exhaustion. One of the things CarnoSyn also does is that it enhances your ability to exert power, not only long-term, but in short-term, because it regulates calcium signaling for stronger, more potent muscle contraction. Again, not only is it pre-workout, it's post-workout. CarnoSyn is very, very helpful in reducing excessive induced oxidative depression of your immune system. So oxidative damage is what happens when unpaired oxygen radical species are starting to bounce off of healthy tissue and degrade it. So if you want to improve your muscle repair time from your heavy workouts, you really do need a comprehensive increase in your beta-alanine intake. Finally, it supports cognitive performance to help athletes withstand not only the physical attributes of stress, but also mental stress. At around the age of 30, 31, the amount of muscle starts to degrade, and it's tied directly to the amount of CarnoSyn that is starting to come into slight deficit at that age. By the time you're 70 years of age, you have up to 62, 63% reduction in your metabolic free CarnoSyn levels. This is literally linked to reduced physical and cognitive performance. It also, a lack of CarnoSyn contributes to apoptosis or cellular aging and self-destruction. For those of you that don't know, I'm almost 73 years of age, and I routinely water ski. Well, you can't do that if your muscles are not functioning properly. So the solution really is beta-alanine to give your body sufficient amounts of CarnoSyn. Okay, so again, a little bit of a primer here. How does this stuff work? Well, first of all, you have to eat an exorbitant amount of animal protein in order to achieve a modicum of beta-alanine in your intake. This is a rate-limiting precursor to CarnoSyn synthesis, and it really needs to be ingested in supplement form. So you take beta-alanine, you combine it with histidine, which is in ample supply in the human body, and you create CarnoSyn, which is a combination dipeptide which helps to delay muscle fatigue under extraordinary load. Now, the barriers for beta-alanine historically have been paresthesia. Now, a lot of people who love to lift iron or do excessive workouts, they like that feeling of, wow, something's really happening here. They get the tinglies around the mouth or in their earlobes or even in their extremities. But trust me when I tell you, a lot of women don't want that. They don't want to feel like they're having, a problem metabolically. So they've avoided that. Well, and that's really a shame because beta-alanine combined with creatine, for example, is extraordinarily valuable for both men and women as you seek to improve your muscle mass and your overall body composition. Conventional beta-alanine really requires 3.2 to 6.4 grams a day to be really effective. And it's difficult to fit this into smaller formats or create even a multi-benefit formula. Well, this is where the beauty of CarnoSyn 4X comes into play. We looked at a way to try and make the product effective without the paresthesia aggravating effect. All right, so what is this? Well, what we discovered is CarnoSyn 4X, which is created through a hydrooleo coating of the actual molecule, solves two big barriers that beta-alanine presents, not only for brands, but for consumers. We've proven now in a clinical setting that it is 4 times more bioavailable than regular beta-alanine. Let me have that sink in for a minute. It's 4 times more bioavailable than regular beta-alanine. It also doesn't create paresthesia, and it provides brand owners and formulators an extraordinary opportunity to create formulations that you never thought humanly possible. So if you stop and think about the math, if you need 3.2 grams of beta-alanine a day, and this is 4 times as powerful as regular beta-alanine in terms of bioavailability, you take 3.2 and divide it by 4, and you get a remarkable opportunity with flexible formulations for under a gram of CarnoSyn 4X. It achieved nearly 4.5 times increase in actual circulation in the body. Now, this is extraordinary. This chart that you're looking at shows that the mean plasma beta-alanine expressed in micromoles per liter was substantially higher for longer in an 8-hour period in the study subjects. Plasma beta-alanine concentrations were measured over the 8 hours of the study, and CarnoSyn 4X showed significantly higher, more sustained absorption curves. The study reported that a VAS score of 0.62, which is the visual analog score associated with paresthesia, was significantly lower than conventional beta-alanine, supporting improved consumer compliance. I've already talked about flexibility of formulations, but now with CarnoSyn 4X, which is a free-flowing powder, it can be encapsulated. As I mentioned, it is free-flowing, it is water-soluble, and it's resistant to thermal processing. And it's a fine powder. So you have reduced clumping if you're putting it in a pre-packaged beverage, for example. This is a really extraordinary development for those people that are engaged in utilization of beta-alanine and CarnoSyn in a host of applications. Conventional beta-alanine struggles to survive in the gut, preventing its benefits from reaching the muscles. As I alluded to, this hydrooleo technology is really a liposomal micelle formulation. It's wrapped in this coating and protects it throughout the gastrointestinal tract. And these coated particles pass through the gut lining cells, bypassing restricted absorption pathways. Simultaneously, normal intestinal digestion releases more beta-alanine in the gut. And protected from oxidation and premature excretion in the bloodstream, more beta-alanine reaches the muscles and the brain. So the small format opportunities, let's say you want to come up with the effective quantity of, 2.4 grams you would create a capsule, a single capsule that would have 600 milligrams of CarnoSyn 4X effectiveness in just one capsule. And you could do that twice a day easily and still achieve a clinical level required of beta-alanine to initiate protection from things like sarcopenia. You can put it in powders. I've alluded to that. It's even compressible. You can put it in chewables. We've even done some benchtop tests on gummies and found out it is very stable. The co-formulation opportunities are legend. But if you stop and think about what's going on with the world of creatine, creatine combined with CarnoSyn 4X is a complete home run. Just look at the studies that are published on creatine with beta-alanine. Collagen, everybody's into collagen because they want to restore their pool of activated protein molecules to repair skin and all kinds of things. Well, imagine what happens when you combine collagen with CarnoSyn 4X. Taurine, which is one of the key ingredients in most of these energy drinks that you see available pretty much everywhere, taurine is a very important amino acid in that it's got its highest concentration in cardiac muscle. Of course, electrolytes, branched-chain amino acids, any number of other opportunities for combination, even with plant proteins or whey. And I think that's really an enormous opportunity for people who are engaged in looking for product differentiation based on legitimate sound science. Fitness as a lifestyle is no longer just going to the gym and pushing iron or doing repetitive motion, athletic training on various machines. You have many more people now that are engaged in all kinds of diffuse activities. You've got competitive athletes, you've got recreational athletes, you've got people taking up pickleball at the age of 60 or 70, you've got personal fitness activities. The internet is legend with an enormous series of opportunities, everything from Tai Chi sitting to yoga workouts to chair workouts. It's pretty astonishing what's out there. Essentially, you need to give your body the fuel in order to achieve maximum outcome of all of these various efforts. So the sports nutrition claims that are really supported with over 55 clinical studies are really essential. Increase working and exercise capacity of muscles, increase strength of muscles, improved endurance by virtue of providing a buffering of lactic acid, speeding up recovery, helping to repair damaged tissue in striated muscle, enhancing the buffering capacity of muscles by increasing the pool of carnosine in your body, and elevating muscle carnosine levels so that you'll have a store of this buffering capacity if you have a fight or flight situation you have to deal with, or you're engaged in intermittent physical activity requiring sudden surges of energy utilization. It also is showing incredible benefit in enhancing mental focus, decreasing overall acidosis in the body, delaying fatigue during the workout, improving your speed. And I will tell you, I have seen firsthand what happens when somebody increases their speed by 1, 2, or 3% in a velodrome setting, or in a swimming pool, or even in long distance running. It's really extraordinary to see how beta-alanine has worked so incredibly well to really provide Olympic athletes with a cutting edge that's really extraordinary to behold. Obviously, CarnoSyn works to enhance exercise training, improving overall muscle performance. But I have to say, one of the regulatory advantages of using CarnoSyn and CarnoSyn 4X is that in all the world, this is the only beta-alanine with FDA new dietary ingredient status, and you can read all about that on the NDI report number 1103. So it's now time for your questions, and I'll attempt to give you some bona fide science-based answers. Thank you for your attention today.
Thank you, Mark. Great presentation. Really great to see such a list of benefits included in the benefit, in the claims section. And my biggest interest, and I would think our audience interest, is just that there's over 50 studies backing up with scientific level data. So I want to compliment you and congratulate you on how far you've taken the company and your products. And again, thank you so much for your presentation and your time today. I know you're very busy.
Thanks a lot, Jeannie. It's seldom that you get an opportunity in business to find something, nurture it, test it again, test it yet again, and then get leading researchers around the world to step up and do everything from muscle biopsies on competitive athletes to go to nursing homes in South America. For example, we did a study in Brazil with people that were in nursing homes and administered CarnoSyn. And within a brief period of time, these non-ambulatory people were starting to get out of bed and walking. I can't tell you how gratifying it is to be in an industry that still permits us to innovate. And, we've been working 15 years minimum on trying to figure out how to create the beta-alanine that we source only one form of beta-alanine. It comes to us from Japan. We don't trust a lot of other supply chains. We know that our material is pristine. I've actually been to the facilities in northern Japan, and they synthetically create this versus companies elsewhere in the world that use recombinant technology or start with E. coli and things like that. And we take great pride in the fact that it's the only NDI recognized beta-alanine in the world. And that's saying something. So thank you for your comments. I have a really great team behind me that does the work, everybody from the late Roger Harris to, Jay Hoffman and Craig Stout and Craig Sale and all these wonderful researchers that, have punctured their own legs and taken muscle biopsies and evaluated to see how much beta-alanine, how much CarnoSyn got into their muscle. So yeah, it's deeply gratifying. And to have something now at this juncture in human history where all of a sudden these companies have discovered that these peptides that they had in their back room for the last 20 years, whether it's tirzepatide or retatrutide or whatever the combination of amino acids is, really work so efficiently to reduce the epidemic of obesity that we've seen, certainly in the United States, but elsewhere, where the Western diet has sort of taken over historical eating habits. So sometimes it's not only having the right product, it's also having the right time to have the right product. And with the millions and millions of people who are losing weight, they develop that sort of saggy face and that jowly look, and their skin starts hanging off of them. And this is really part of the answer, is how do I prevent my muscles from going away along with my body fat? The way to do that is to help prevent sarcopenia by boosting your intake of beta-alanine. I was given a speech at an event in La Jolla earlier this year where the lady who was in charge of the presentation said, I love beta-alanine for my husband, but I won't take it because I light up like a Christmas tree if I take it. And I don't like that feeling of, tingles and pins and needles. And it's like I've swallowed a whole bottle of niacin. And I said, well, I'm happy to report that we're here today to talk about why CarnoSyn 4X and its companion product Tribosyn is such an extraordinary advancement in the world of science. So, yeah, I think this is a real home run for women who like to take creatine but are looking for something else to help improve that muscle mass. and reduce their recovery times, whether it's doing a strenuous Pilates class or long distance running or cycling or whatever it is that they're stressing their body with. So I think those are all important considerations, and we're delighted to have this available.
Spot on, and it's really great. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead, Jeannie. No, I see a few questions here that it's interesting. I probably already answered a bunch of them, but where do we get our beta-alanine? You know, years and years ago, we looked at who were the providers of beta-alanine, and we settled upon one in Japan that had been doing it for decades. And they didn't really understand that the beta-alanine they were producing would have all these different attributes. Beta-alanine is a primary chemical used in the synthesis of pantothenic acid, which is vitamin B5, for those that don't know what pantothenic acid is. So in order to make decalcium pantothenate, you start with beta-alanine. And that's where 99% of their beta-alanine went, until we came along and said, we'd like to source this because we think this is the purest, cleanest form. You have the greatest amount of history in manufacturing it. And so we're very happy that we're having our partner in Japan produce it for us on a continuous basis. So that answers one of the questions. There's another question here that somebody just sent in that, you know, if you have a specific beta-alanine dose in either a pre-workout or some kind of other supplement, you know, what do you do with CarnoSyn 4X? Well, you kind of divide your original dose by 4, and that kind of gives you the answer, which is also interesting when you think about if the effective dose for your target audience, let's say, is 3.2 grams, all you need is 800 milligrams of the effective beta-alanine from CarnoSyn 4X. And if you split that up into 2 different doses, so one in the morning, one at night, or one pre-workout, one post-workout, you can put that in a capsule. You can also put it in a powder. You can put it in a gummy bear. You can put it in a gel pack. You can do any number of things because of the extraordinary stability of this stuff. So, yeah, this is going to give a lot of people in our industry an opportunity to play mad scientist with a lot less material that you have to deploy to achieve the same metabolic outcome, which is really the mission critical component here. No paresthesia, reduced amount of dosages, and a more liberal panorama of things that you could deploy CarnoSyn 4X into.
All right, I have a question for you, Mark. During your conversation, your presentation, you highlighted hydrooleo technology. Tell me a little bit more about what that is and how it helps make CarnoSyn 4X stand out.
That's a really good question. Hydrooleo technology is really micellization. It's how you take a molecule that has certain physical attributes in either stomach, duodenum, gut, small bowel, large bowel, and protect it from various sites where it can get released prematurely if you're trying to avoid sarcopenia. So what we did is we spent a lot of time looking at various coatings, various substrates, various stability platforms, and we settled on this hydrooleo micellization, which is really a comprehensive way to coat this molecule in such a way as to get it past those sensitive areas that would lead to paresthesia, get it into the part of the gut where the paresthesia is not being signaled, and then have it absorb and be retained in the blood plasma. Remember that chart you saw with that kind of giant delta there versus regular beta-alanine? That giant delta represents the length of time and the significant increase in absorption that takes place without paresthesia because we targeted the absorption. And by micellizing this material, we're creating an environment that I think is going to radically transform both pre-workout and post-workout formulations, not to mention the protein shakes that are being developed right now with CarnoSyn 4X for those people that are having a deficit of protein. You know, people forget when you go on a GLP or GLP-1 or GLP-2 protocol, whether you're orally administering this thing or you're taking weekly injections, the thing that happens is you're getting signaling of this enzyme, which tells your body you're full, you don't need any more food, stop eating. And over the course of several weeks, your appetite significantly reduces. And so one of the side effects of GLP-1 therapies is that people aren't eating enough protein. And in addition to that, they're not eating enough fiber. And so one of the deleterious side effects of GLP-1 therapy is your elimination is greatly compromised. So what you ate on Monday may not depart your body until Thursday. Well, that's not a healthy situation to have all that stuff hanging around your system. So the real issue is, how do we improve preservation of muscle? How do we address a protein deficiency caused by not eating enough? And how do we address the issue of insufficient dietary fibers, mostly soluble fibers? Well, one way to do that is to look at a meal replacement formula, which is rich in protein, rich in the soluble fibers, rich in nutrients, but also rich in CarnoSyn 4X. And so what you're doing now is you're addressing not only protein deficiencies and meal replacements, you're addressing sarcopenia, which is muscle wasting disease. And so if you want to look like what somebody looks like at 75 when they're 35 and they've lost 60 pounds, that's what they're going to look like if they're not taking CarnoSyn 4X and supplementing with high quality, high protein efficiency rated proteins. That's a long answer. Sorry for the confusion.
It's wonderful perspective. You know, we talk a lot about GLP-1. That's the hot topic. So it's really interesting to hear that perspective and a very fresh, different type of insight there. So thank you for elaborating on that so deeply.
Yeah, you're welcome.
So let's talk about any interactions with other ingredients for multi-benefit formulas.
That's a really good point. And I think the micellization of this molecule has really given it a new life. You know, a lot of circumstances in formulation, you put something in and it degrades something else that's present. And it's not because you didn't think it through. It's just that there are metabolic reactions. There are chemical reactions that take place. The beauty of CarnoSyn 4X is it's not chemically reactive in stasis. In other words, if you have it in a protein supplement, it's not going to degrade any of the other compounds. And likewise, it's very hard to degrade CarnoSyn 4X because of its coating. So that's beneficial. But if you stop and think about, does this only work in powder? No, it works in capsules. It works in tablets. We've also done some really interesting work with gummies. And, you know, gummies are sort of like everywhere now. You want to take something for your hair, you eat a gummy. I'm more concerned about all the sugar that's associated with the gummies. But hey, as long as people are supplementing and they realize they need it, this works really well in gummies and it doesn't degrade. And so we've created a thermal barrier, which means, you know, we're not going to cook it off. If you took regular beta-alanine and tried to put it into a gummy, you end up with a Kjeldahl reaction where you're cooking the gummy syrup. You've got to get it warm enough to put it into a mold environment and then cool it. So we were looking for a way to preserve the beta-alanine for those people that needed the benefit of a gummy dosage form without having the degradation normally associated with an unprotected beta-alanine molecule. We've also tested this in in ready to mix and also RTDs. And depending upon the pH, and I think it's and around 6.1, 6.2, it's totally fine, which is great when you stop and think about the opportunities to put this into ready to drink formulations or ready to mix formulations. So it's a really remarkable substance. I think it's actually going to be bigger than CarnoSyn was. And CarnoSyn was not a small event. There's such an enormous series of needs that's far beyond just what happens in a gym or in a high performance athletic setting. You know, you may have heard me talk earlier today about, you know, I water ski at 72 and a half. I'm water skiing. You know, that's pretty impressive. But what's really impressive, I just hop on 2 skis, lean back in the chair. You know, that's what they tell you when you learn. For me, it was 65 years ago. But you need strength in your legs to push against the skis in the water, and you need to hold that rope when you're doing 30, 35 miles an hour behind a speedboat. And so you have to really think through, what are my objectives? What am I trying to do as a young person, middle-aged person, older person? Well, I want to live a long time, but I want to enjoy the life that I'm going to have for a long time versus just relegate myself to an occasional night out, reading a good book. You know, that's all well and good. And some people, that's their calling in life. I'm a very active person. I want to be able to hug grandkids and chase them around the house and throw them in the water and you know, read bedtime stories and stuff. But I also want to remain physically active, because the more physically active you remain as you get older, the chances of living a very long and productive life are greatly improved. If you become sedentary, your chances of having debilitating issues that are metabolically driven through lack of exercise become almost exponentially higher. So I think this is the kind of thing where we're looking at an enormous panorama of opportunities, formulators. This isn't just about gymnasiums anymore. This isn't just about cycling. This isn't just about competitive swimming. It's about wanting to live your best life for the longest period of time. And if you're doing GLP-1 therapies, or if you're doing some other type of therapies and you're addressing overweight, this is a wonderful opportunity to prevent muscle wasting disease, because the clock keeps ticking. We all get older every minute of the day. And so I'm just trying to retard as long as possible, you know, the eventual outcome, which is I don't wake up breathing one morning. But I'd like to really enjoy life in between now and then. And I think CarnoSyn 4X is going to give millions and millions of us around the world that opportunity. I'd also like to say it really is demonstrating increasing CarnoSyn in your system has even been tested of late as anti-carcinogenic, particularly in women who are concerned about breast cancer. And I didn't make this up. You can go study CarnoSyn either through PubMed or the NIH, National Institutes of Health researchers. It's remarkable stuff. There are thousands and thousands of published studies showing the beneficial attributes of CarnoSyn. And let's cycle back to the beginning of my presentation. You can't get enough CarnoSyn in your system unless you eat copious amounts of animal protein. So if you're a vegetarian, you're done. So either you supplement with Beta-Alanine, and if you're older and your appetite is decreased anyway, you for sure need to supplement with Beta-Alanine. And the only Beta-Alanine that I would put in my system is the one that we've spent millions of dollars studying over many, many years. CarnoSyn 4X.
Thank you. A body in motion stays in motion. That definitely jumped to mind. It's nice to hear about this product being constructed specifically to support longevity there. Although I would love to finish out our conversation and top the hour today talking about water skiing, because that sounds so nice right now. Let's talk a little bit more about gummies, because you highlighted gummies, and I enjoy your perspectives here on some of this. But, we talked about absorption, degradation. Let's talk about stability when it's mixed into, for say, like a RTM powder for a delivery system.
Right. So when you have a powder, powders are inherently stable unless they're in the presence of moisture. And so we've already done some tests on powders, and it's extremely stable. It's between 18 and 24 months with zero degradation that we've witnessed, which is really good because most powders have a 1 to 2 year shelf life. We also did ready to drink, which was very interesting, and it was predicated on pH. And we have all that information available at our CarnoSyn website, CarnoSyn 4X. And so you can reach out to our resources, which are at nai-online.com. But what's fascinating in the gummy world is that it's all temperature modulated. So if you overcook a gummy, you've got bigger problems than degradation of any of the components. You have degradation of taste, you have potential spoilage issues, and if you make a gummy correctly and you make it with the appropriate components and you don't oversaturate it with heat, the presence of CarnoSyn 4X is very stable. Now, the other question is, how do you package the gummy? Are you packaging in a moisture-protected oxygen barrier? If you are, you have a high degree of stability between, I would say, 12 months and 18 months. Are you protecting it when you're transporting it? Because if you put it in direct sunlight, or if you have it in exorbitant temperatures, let's say north of 95, 100 degrees Fahrenheit for an extended period of time, the stability of the gummy is less concerning than the actual, do you still have a gummy or do you have a giant Play-Doh set? Because it just congeals. So those are critical issues that have to be addressed.
I just want to follow up to, is there any difference here in considerations with liquid stability?
Yeah, liquid stability, it's really good as long as you have the correct pH. And again, liquids are generally considered to be consumed faster than, say, a capsule or a tablet. So, for example, you'll see liquids with a 6-month shelf life, a 1-year shelf life, maybe as much as 18 months. But again, it's all driven by the pH of the underlying material. So as long as you're within a serious range that we have calculated for you, it is incredibly stable. Again, micronutrients and nutrients in general are directly related to ultraviolet impact, which is, light waves, or heat. And if you have both, you can degrade whatever your substance is very quickly. So packaging integrity is critical. Maintaining pH is critical. And then proper storage and transport is really critical. And then follow the directions. Use it before it expires. Because if you don't, it may have lost some of its potency, although we have not, as of yet, seen that with CarnoSyn 4X.
You read my mind. I was going to ask if that's a concern.
Yeah, not yet.
Okay. So I have quite a few questions in the queue that relate to CarnoSyn with creatine specifically. We're getting ready to approach the hour, so I'm going to do my best to jump through as many of these as possible. First, do you see CarnoSyn with HMB and creatine together?
I think there may be some merit for that. Hydroxymethylbutyrate was one of the key components, HMB was one of the key components of the Abbott Ensure product. I think it's either coming off patent or will be off patent shortly, so HMB will be everywhere. I think there is some very good science that suggests muscle protection, but I think the presence of creatine and CarnoSyn takes it to a whole new level, because not only are you addressing deficits in your system of some of the essential components for muscle building, you're also allowing your body to exercise And if you give the tools for exercise rather than just reconstruction of muscle, you have a higher degree of success. So I would think that a formulation containing creatine, HMB, and CarnoSyn 4X would be an exemplary formula.
Okay, great. Follow up for any of our audience members aged over 50 who are hoping to be out water skiing very soon. What is the normal ratio of carnosine and creatine that you would recommend in combination?
So in my household, I use 2 grams of creatine a day, and I take the equivalent of 3.2 grams of CarnoSyn per day. But that means I'm taking 800 milligrams of CarnoSyn 4X. Again, it's 3.2 grams seems to be my baseline threshold for appropriate beta-alanine maintenance in my body, so I can have adequate stores in my muscle of CarnoSyn, which is that dipeptide formed by beta-alanine and histidine. So if I take 800 milligrams a day of the CarnoSyn 4X, in essence, I'm generating 3.2 grams of intake of beta-alanine. The 2 grams of creatine is my sweet spot. And, that happens to be me. There are some people that say you need 3 to 5 grams. Other people say you need a gram of the right type of creatine. I'm a little less concerned about that because I know what works for me. But that seems to be the number. The 3.2 grams clinically studied of beta-alanine seems to be the sweet spot for just about everybody. Again, if you divide that by 4, now you're down to 800 milligrams of CarnoSyn 4X.
Thank you. All right. One more dosing question here.
Yep.
Sarcopenia. I know we were thinking about the trial, GLP-1s. What are the recommendations for dosing twice a day with carnosine and creatine?
I think the simple reality of it is you have to look at how much muscle you're trying to protect and how much was your starting weight when you're doing GLP-1. So, for example, I've heard stories where people start at 250, they end up at 180, okay? So that's a 70-pound delta. Now, the question becomes, is your 70-pound delta 50 pounds of fat and 20 pounds of muscle? Or is it 30 pounds of fat and 40 pounds of muscle? And so part of it is you have to almost work backwards to see, okay, what could I lift when I weighed 250 and what can I lift now? And you start with hand weights. You start with 10 kilos, 5 kilos, whatever you're comfortable with, and you go till exhaustion. So you do repetitive motion on one arm and the other arm, and you see what could I lift to start with? What can I lift now? If you're lifting less and less frequently, you've lost a considerable amount of muscle mass. So in order to regenerate that muscle, the minimum you need of carnosine or beta-alanine effectively is 3.2 grams, okay? So you will need 800 milligrams. I personally, if I were undergoing that treatment, I'd take 800 milligrams of CarnoSyn 4X in the morning and 800 milligrams 4X at night, which would then conceivably give me the upper dose of 6.4 grams. What you're really trying to do with that is rebuild your pool of available carnosine in your muscle, in your system, because your body is screaming for it, but it doesn't have a way to get your attention. Creatine, on the other hand, is really something that generates all kinds of metabolic pathways in the system. Again, I take 2 grams a day, but for somebody who's been on a GLP-1 regimen and they've had a significant deficit of protein intake, I would probably do 3 grams a day with 1.5 in the morning and 1.5 at night. Because let's face it, a lot of your cellular repair happens while you're asleep. And so you need to give the body the tools with which to repair. I will suggest something else for people that haven't thought this through. If you think about them, one of the most powerful enzymes in the body that helps as an antioxidant, it's glutathione. Well, how do you create glutathione? One way to do it is you take N-acetylcysteine, you combine it with glycine, and then you stack it with CarnoSyn 4X. And what you're doing is you're giving the body the mechanism to create its own glutathione in your system. Why is it important to take that way versus just ingest glutathione? Well, glutathione is $400 or $500 a kilo. N-acetylcysteine is much less, and glycine is dirt cheap. And in point of fact, if you ingest glutathione, your stomach is going to break it down into what? N-acetylcysteine and glycine. So why would you take an expensive compound which breaks down in your system versus take the compounds that are already broken down, ingest them in your system, get it through the stomach into the factory of the small intestine where they are conjoined to create the dipeptide known as glutathione. You add CarnoSyn 4X to that, and you're enhancing the uptake because you're keeping it in the bloodstream longer. So it's sort of like when you have glutathione along for the ride with that elevation of beta-alanine in your bloodstream, you have a passenger. Glutathione rides along with the beta-alanine that's in your plasma. So it's repairing things while you don't even know it's repairing things. So in my mind, that's a freebie, but have fun with that because N-acetylcysteine, it's interesting. The FDA wanted to get rid of N-acetylcysteine during COVID. And when I was chair of NPA, we decided, okay, we're not going to let that stand. You can't say this isn't an appropriate dietary supplement. And then we found out what the situation was, that apparently some medical practitioners, licensed doctors, when they tried everything else dealing with COVID patients, one of them said, let's try giving N-acetylcysteine. And guess what? Those patients recovered. Well, when word got out that happened, guess what? Certain pharmaceutical interests were a little less sanguine about allowing that to stay on the market. So we were able to prevail as an industry, and N-acetylcysteine is still readily available, but it almost wasn't. So it's important to remain vigilant, because if something is wanting to be taken off the market by regulators, you have to ask yourself why. So anyway, that's a little sidebar.
A little juicy comment. Interesting. We're going to get ready to follow up with 2 questions real quick. The first, are there any considerations for patients with chronic kidney disease? Always a question, right?
Yeah, none that I've seen so far. But again, one of the things with taking enormous amounts of creatine is you can create creatinase. And obviously that has a negative impact on kidneys. So again, I don't recommend taking these giant boluses of creatine. A gram or 2 for me. I weigh 208 pounds. I'm 6'3". It works for me. But just pounding creatine for creatine's sake, yeah, you can probably stress your kidneys. And having too much creatinine is never a great thing. Again, taking it with CarnoSyn 4X, though, changes a lot of the metabolic utilization of creatine. So if you're really concerned about it, make sure you have the guidance of a good clinician, or do blood work from time to time, just to make sure you're not setting one parameter of your metabolism over another.
Thank you. All right, we're going to get ready to wrap up. Here's a perfect closing here. So today we spoke specifically about CarnoSyn 4X, which is part of your larger CarnoSyn line. For your product already out there in different formulations. I feel like this has gone from a formulation discussion to us all scratching our heads and wanting to jump to look into utilizing it. Will the products identify strictly as CarnoSyn, or will they identify as CarnoSyn 4X?
Well, because we have patents pending on the CarnoSyn 4X and we have current patents in CarnoSyn, we're very careful to monitor who's using what. And so they have to sign appropriate agreements to help us police the marketplace, because even though we'd like to believe everyone's honest and forthright, that's not always the case. So if you have a concern about that, you can check our website to see who the authorized users are, and who has licensure, and who has licensed the patents and the trademarks. And we try and keep that up on a daily, if not weekly basis. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you very much, Mark. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your summer. Enjoy the boat, enjoy water skiing. Is there anything else you'd like to wrap up with before we close out today's discussion?
No, just thank you for your time, and for everyone watching this and who is curious, dig in, look into our website, look into our research, look into the published research from whether it's on PubMed or the National Institutes of Health. We're very proud of our work. We're also very, very, very proud of our colleagues in science, whether they're in Israel or in Asia, South America, North America, Europe. We've done studies everywhere. And I will say this, one of the things we saw of late that has given us a great deal of hope, we did a study on post-traumatic stress disorder. And it turns out that Beta-Alanine as CarnoSyn 4X has the capacity to address some of the core issues associated with PTSD. So we're going to be looking at all kinds of modules for how we can get this to people who are affected. Again, to echo what I said at the start, it's very gratifying to be in an industry and in a business that allows us to find solutions, natural solutions to some of life's most nagging problems. And so I'm very excited to be affiliated with this, to help spearhead it. And I think what you guys are doing at the Outlook is really great to bring this type of information to the public. It's a great public service you're doing, and we very much appreciate the opportunity to participate. Thanks, Jeannie.
Absolutely. And to all of our audience members, we want to thank you so much, not only for joining us today, but for all the work you're doing behind the scenes in the industry, looking at these products and sharing that same vision that Mark has to improve health for the broader community. We are going to wrap up at this time. So I want to say thank you just one more time. As we do wrap up, I'd like to ask the audience if they wouldn't mind participating in a brief survey. That survey is going to appear on your screen just after this presentation concludes. It helps us come up with more ideas for content like today's webinar. So we hope you'll help fill that out. You're also going to receive an email alerting you once today's webcast is available for replay on demand, and we hope that you'll forward on that announcement to any colleagues who missed today's live event. So to everyone, thanks for joining. Have a wonderful rest of your day and week, and we hope to see you again soon. Take care.